Thank you very much. Tomorrow night, of course, more on America's military options. But until then, thanks very much for watching. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. The Point with Greta Van Susteren begins right now.
The Point, tracking the terrorists.
We have launched the largest single investigation in the history of the United States.
The Manhunt, the worldwide search for terrorists. How they got into the U.S. undetected. Was there more authorities could have done to prevent the unthinkable?
We will develop the tools, strengthen our capacity, and persist in our investigation and effort to disrupt and to make and reduce the risk of reoccurrence in matters like this.
Plus, how terrorists can slip by security and what the airlines now need to do to prevent it. Blunt words from the former head of security for El Al Airlines.
We said, like, God, forgive us for everything, we've done wrong. I thought I was gone, definitely, especially, when the flames came. I really thought, my life was over.
The dramatic story of escape from the World Trade Center attack and the desperate search now to find her colleagues. The Point, tracking the terrorists. Now from Washington, Greta Van Susteren.
Behind me, the Pentagon, where American Airlines Flight 77 slammed into it, cruelly claiming 188 lives. The investigation in the ruins continues. And in New York, authorities say almost 5,100 people are unaccounted for. You're looking at live pictures. Thousands of rescue workers continue to team up on round-the-clock shifts, still holding hope they can find someone inside alive. And then there is this. CNN was the first to shoot these surreal pictures from above what's become known as Ground Zero. You can see the devastation and the crater that remains and the smoke that continues to billow. The FBI is calling this the largest crime scene ever on domestic soil. And today, Attorney General John Ashcroft took this a step further.
We have launched the largest single investigation in the history of the United States. We have 4,000 active FBI agents pursuing a wide variety of tips and understandings and questions. We'll get to the bottom of this circumstance, but we'll also develop an understanding of how we can prevent further episodes, assaults on America and our people.
5 days after the nation's worst terrorist act, the Justice Department says it's identified 19 hijackers, all of whom are said to have Middle Eastern backgrounds. Authorities are also trying to zero in on accomplices, some of whom may still be in the United States. CNN national correspondent Mike Boettcher begins our coverage of tracking the terrorists. He's in Atlanta. Mike?
Well, Greta, tonight the Justice Department has issued arrest warrants for 2 more material witnesses. That happened about 2 hours ago. We do not know the names or what their connection could be to these terrorist attacks. That raises the number of material witnesses to 4. 2 others are in custody, although law enforcement sources are telling us that they are not cooperating in the investigation. Now, FBI agents have fanned out across the country to search various locations. The FBI was back at this apartment house in South Florida taking away evidence. It is believed to be the residence of Saeed Al-Ghamdi, one of the suspected hijackers on United Flight 93. At least one other hijacker on the same flight may have lived in the same building. All over the country, leads are being pursued, and in New Jersey, just across the river from New York, another apartment was searched. This one was the residence of one or possibly both men picked up off an Amtrak train, allegedly carrying cash, airline tickets, and box cutters. These 2 men were taken off a train in Fort Worth, Texas. Ayub Ali Khan, Mohammed Jawed Azmath. They were originally on Tuesday, the day of the hijacking, flying from Newark to San Antonio, and were diverted to St. Louis when airspace was closed in the United States. Internationally, focus is still on the masterminds. The top of the most wanted list has not changed and will not, according to U.S. officials. But the effort to add suspect names after Osama bin Laden's is accelerating both in the U.S. and internationally.
He headed it up and organized it, but it's a very broad, kind of loose coalition of groupings that includes not only his forces, but it also includes, for example, Islamic Jihad from Egypt.
Members of Egyptian Islamic Jihad fill the top ranks of bin Laden's al-Qaeda organization. Islamic Jihad's leader, Dr. Ayman Zawahiri, was photographed with bin Laden at a press conference in 1998. He is Egypt's most wanted man, suspected of playing a role in the assassination of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. Widely considered to be one of bin Laden's top lieutenants and chief strategist, Zawahiri is also a close personal friend of the al-Qaeda chief, acting as bin Laden's personal doctor. Bin Laden himself denied he was responsible in a statement released through an Arabic-language satellite news channel. As for me, I have been living in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and following its leader's rules, he says. The current leader does not allow me to exercise such operations.
He's a prime suspect, but we have to be realistic. This is not a person. That's the problem. It is a whole host of people and a whole host of countries that are harboring those people.
Now, it is not a surprise that Egyptian Islamic Jihad might be tied to this. In every past terrorist act since Khobar Towers and the Cole that bin Laden has been blamed for committing, Egyptian Islamic Jihad has been listed as one of the suspects because they make up a good deal of the membership of al-Qaeda. Greta?
Mike, what's the point? We've heard that bin Laden has denied any involvement at all. Why deny it? And does the United States simply not buy that at all?
Well, he has taken the tack before of denying and then later on in interviews saying, but you can see the reasons for these attacks, why they had to occur. So he shifts from denials to non-denial denials later on, and that seems to have been a pattern, and it doesn't seem to be any different now.
What about the ones that are in custody? Do we know the level of cooperation with the federal government?
Well, the two material witnesses who are in custody are not cooperating, we are told, but those two men were pulled off the train in Texas and flown to New York. We are told that they are talking quite a bit.
Do we have any idea what they're saying and whether or not they link bin Laden to the terrorism here in the United States?
No, we do not know either of those two things, purely speculation, but you wouldn't think they'd be spending a lot of time with these guys and flying them up to New York if they weren't talking about this.
Well, let me ask the other, perhaps more urgent question. Are they providing any information which might suggest there is more terrorism about to hit the United States?
I don't know if they are providing that, but I will say in talking to intelligence sources here and worldwide that there is the belief that this is not over, that there are other cells in this country, and especially when the United States does activate whatever plan it's going to activate in fighting what the president calls a war against terrorism, that there will be retaliation. Everyone expects that in the intelligence community, and they believe that, Greta, frankly, over the last 5 years there's been a concerted effort by al-Qaeda to insert cells into this country, and they believe there are others out there waiting to be activated.
All right, thanks to Mike Boettcher for joining us this evening. The FBI has issued arrest warrants for 4 material witnesses. 2 of those people are already in custody. One of those men was carrying a fake pilot's license. For more on that part of the story, here's CNN Justice correspondent Kelly Arena.
The Attorney General aggressively hit the airwaves. His message? The FBI needs increased authority to protect the nation against terrorism.
We need to upgrade and strengthen
our ability to take action, and we're going to make that the focus of our endeavor.
The administration is planning to present a comprehensive package of proposals which would include, among other things, expanded wiretap authority, tightening up money laundering laws, and beefing up immigration policy.
We're a nation of law, a nation of civil right. We're also a nation under attack.
Ashcroft telling congressional leaders in private meetings at FBI headquarters there is evidence terrorists involved in Tuesday's attacks are still in the United States, making the need for reform even more urgent. Lawmakers say they're open to change, but not at the expense of civil liberties.
We'll do it within our framework of laws and our Constitution. If we don't do it within our Constitution and our laws, then in some ways they win.
The Senate has already added some changes to wiretap law in a spending bill, prompting an angry response from the ACLU. It said, quote, "At its very first opportunity, the Senate passed legislation that threatens privacy rights without receiving any public showing that it would make us any safer."
Security adjustments will not be limited to prohibiting terrorist activity, but are expected to change the behavior of ordinary citizens as well. In pursuit of the few, the challenge lies in balancing the needs of the many. Greta?
Kelly, thanks for joining us. Kelly Arena in Washington. How could such horrific attacks have been carried out against the Pentagon and the World Trade Center? How vulnerable are we? Jeffrey Beatty has made his living dealing with terrorism. He's a former Army Delta Force officer, and he's worked with the FBI and CIA. In fact, just a few weeks ago, he met with security officers for the World Trade Tower to discuss possible terrorist attacks. Before that, he also was an advisor to the movie The Siege. Jeff, how could this have happened?
Well, Greta, we basically had, to oversimplify it, 3 strikes and we're out. We had a failure at the national level to detect the operation as it was being planned, as rehearsals were carried out, as people were moving into this country. That was strike 1. Strike 2 was when we were not able to prevent weapons from being on the plane. They got through screening somehow. They may well prove to have been legal weapons that at the time were legal under then the existing FAA guidelines. That was strike 2. And then third, once the weapons were on the plane, there was no adequate onboard security measures and procedures to make sure that a cockpit incursion did not occur. We've had cockpit incursions in the past. We had others this past week, and they resulted in just an incredible tragedy. And that was strike 3.
Jeff, are there other weaknesses in our system? At least let's first focus on transportation.
Well, I can tell you this, that Secretary Mineta, in his statements earlier today, said the phrase that our transportation system is under attack. I think all of our senior officials are choosing their words very carefully these days, Greta, and I take him to mean the entire transportation sector. I can tell you that other folks that we work with are very, very ratcheted up in the transportation sector, on the alert for unattended packages, etc. We may not see the same type of attack, but I think that we will see follow-on actions at some point in the near future.
Jeff, you've been so steeped in this your whole life. Are you surprised by this?
Sadly, I'm not surprised by it. I'm disappointed. You know, a lot of us have been told that we were Chicken Little, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. But we've tried to do the best we can. I feel that to this extent we've failed. We didn't make an adequate case to set out what the threat was and how real it was. Now, though, America is out of denial. I think that we have a very good chance, as the President said, to take actions that would prohibit this type of activity from happening again for generations to come.
Mike Boettcher just reported there are other possible cells here in the United States. Do you think that we have a reason to have fear in the very near future?
Well, I agree that we know that there are people still here in the United States. I believe, Greta, that this attack actually succeeded beyond what the terrorists hoped it would succeed. And they, I'm sure, were ready then for some follow-on attacks, maybe attacks against the responders or attacks in other parts of the country. Again, all designed to show potency, to show that they could strike us where we lived and at will. You know, and one other interesting thing a lot of people hadn't focused on, that this operation didn't start on Tuesday in New York. It actually started about 48 hours before that when an ally of ours, Massoud, in Afghanistan, there was an assassination attempt. He had helped us before bring back Ramzi Youssef and Miramal Qazi, and it's interesting to note that he was taken out of the equation 48 hours before action started in this country to hinder our ability to come back into Afghanistan.
Jeff Beatty, thank you very much for joining us this evening. With a heightened focus on security, the Transportation Secretary is appointing task forces to come up with ways to heighten the safety of American skies. CNN's Patty Davis joins us from Reagan National Airport with more. Patty?
Well, Greta, the new aviation task force is made up of 2 teams, one looking at airport security, the other looking at cockpit access. Those teams expected to report back within 2 weeks to the Transportation Department. Now, Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta asked today how 2 suspected hijackers, their names Khalid Al-Midhar and Salim Al-Hamzi, could have boarded that American plane that crashed into the Pentagon in the first place. Now, both were on a federal watch list given to the FAA and were the subject of a massive manhunt, according to U.S. authorities.
They might have been on the watch lists of, let's say, immigration or